I thought losing my apartment to fire was the worst thing that could happen until my own parents said, "Not our problem." I slept on a friend's couch, rebuilt my life from ash, and tried to believe it was just bad luck. Then a fire investigator called me by name and asked questions that made my mother go silent. That's when I realized the flames didn't end that night. The sound was not loud. It was not the roaring catastrophe I would have expected to signal the end of my life as I knew it. It was a sharp, distinct pop, like a knuckle cracking in a quiet room, followed immediately by the wet hiss of something melting. I sat up in bed. The sheets tangled around my legs. The digital clock on my nightstand read 3:14 in the morning. My room was dark, but there was a haze hanging in the air. A spectral gray fog that caught the street lamp light filtering through the blinds. I sniffed the air. It did not smell like a campfire or a fireplace. It smelled chemical. It smelled like burning hair and old tires. Panic usually hits the chest first, but for me, it hit the stomach. A cold, heavy stone dropped into my gut. I threw the covers off and put my feet on the floor. The carpet was warm. That was the detail that made me move. The floor was warm. I did not scream. I did not waste time looking for my phone charger. I had prepared for this, in a theoretical, abstract way that I never actually thought I would need to enact. I reached under the bed and dragged out the red canvas duffel bag I called my go bag. It had copies of my birth certificate, a spare set of keys, a flashlight, and a change of underwear. I had packed it 3 years ago after watching a documentary on earthquakes. I jammed my laptop into it, not bothering to shut it down, just snapping the lid closed. Then the alarm started. It was not the chirping smoke detector in the hallway. It was the building-wide system, a deafening, rhythmic braying that vibrated against my teeth. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" I grabbed the doorknob. It was cool to the touch. I opened the door to the hallway and was immediately hit by a wall of heat and a thick, choking darkness. The emergency lights were flickering, casting seizure-inducing strobes against the peeling wallpaper. I saw Mrs. Higgins from 4B standing in her doorway, clutching a ceramic cat, her eyes wide and vacant. "Mrs. Higgins, we have to go," I said, my voice sounding scrapped and raw. She looked at me, blinking. "My cat," she whispered. "This is the cat," I said, pointing to the ceramic statue. "Bring him. We have to move." I took her arm. It felt frail, like a bundle of dry sticks under the sleeve of her nightgown. We moved toward the stairwell. The air was getting thicker, darker. The smoke was not floating. It was rolling, heavy and oily, banking off the ceiling and curling down toward us. When I pushed into the stairwell, the noise doubled. It was an echo chamber of screaming alarms and shouting voices. People were surging down from the upper floors. I saw a man carrying a toddler in one arm and a flat-screen television in the other. I saw a woman wearing a winter coat over nothing but underwear, sobbing into her hands as she walked. Then the sprinklers kicked on. It was not a gentle mist. It was a deluge of brown, stagnant water that had been sitting in the pipes for decades. It smelled like rust and rot. It soaked us instantly, plastering my hair to my skull and making the concrete stairs slick and treacherous. "Careful," I said to Mrs. Higgins, gripping the railing with one hand and her arm with the other. We descended. 4th floor, 3rd floor. The air grew clearer as we went down, but the panic grew denser. People were shoving. A teenager in headphones pushed past me, nearly knocking Mrs. Higgins into the wall. I caught her, my shoulders slamming against the concrete. "Hey," I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the chaos. By the time we hit the ground floor, my lungs were burning. We burst out the heavy steel fire door and into the alleyway. The cold was shocking. It was November in the city, the kind of damp freeze that sinks into your marrow. I was wearing flannel pajama bottoms and a thin t-shirt. The freezing air hit my wet skin, and I began to shake violently within seconds. We stumbled around to the front of the building, joining a growing crowd of tenants huddled on the sidewalk. Blue and red lights painted the brick facades of the neighboring buildings. The sirens were a physical pressure in the air. I turned back to look at the building. my building. The place where I had lived for 4 years. The place where I had painted the kitchen yellow and hung framed prints of botanical gardens. Flames were clawing out of the windows on the 5th floor. They looked angry, alive. They licked up the side of the brickwork, shattering glass as they went. I watched as a window blew out, a shower of sparkling shards raining down onto the street below. My unit was on the 4th floor, directly below the inferno. I watched as the fire seemed to drip down, heavy and liquid, igniting my curtains. I saw the silhouette of my living room window frame turn orange, then black. "It's gone," a voice said beside me. I turned. A firefighter was standing there, adjusting his gloves. He was looking up at the blaze with a detached, professional exhaustion. "My apartment," I said, pointing. "That one. 4C. He glanced at me, then back at the fire. He didn't offer false hope. He didn't pat my shoulder, likely a total loss. He said, "The water damage alone will gut the lower units. Fire is taking the roof. Structural integrity is compromised. Total loss." The words landed like physical blows. 1, 2. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in soot and rust-colored water. I was holding the strap of my go bag so tightly my knuckles were white. This bag was it. This was everything I owned now. A laptop, some underwear, a photocopy of my birth certificate. The firefighter moved away, shouting orders to a crew unrolling a hose. I stood there, shivering, watching my life burn. I thought about the coffee mug I had left in the sink. I thought about the winter coat hanging in the closet that I would never wear again. I thought about the books on my shelf, the pages curling and blackening, the words disappearing forever. They set up the emergency shelter in the community hall of a church 2 blocks away. It was a sterile, fluorescent-lit room that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. They had set up rows of metal folding chairs and tables with urns of hot water and boxes of donuts. I sat in one of the metal chairs, a gray wool blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The Red Cross volunteers had given it to me. It was scratchy and smelled of mothballs. But it was dry. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hollow, trembling exhaustion. My brain felt sluggish, like I was moving through deep water. Around me, other residents were huddled in groups. I saw Mrs. Higgins sitting with a young couple who were rubbing her back. I saw the man with the toddler. His wife had arrived and was hugging them both, crying softly. Families, partners, safety nets. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. It was at 12% battery. I stared at the black screen for a long moment. I am 32 years old. I have a job. I pay my taxes. I am responsible. But in that moment, sitting in a church basement with soot on my face and nothing to my name, I wanted my mother. I wanted my father. I wanted the irrational, primal safety of parents who would come and fix it. I dialed the landline. They were old-fashioned like that. They never kept their cell phones on at night. It rang 4 times. Hello, my mother's voice. Diane Butler. It was thick with sleep, but underlined with that perpetual tone of mild annoyance she carried like a handbag. "Mom," I said. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Mom, it's Sarah. Sarah." She sounded more awake now. "Do you know what time it is? Is everything all right?" "There was a fire," I said. The words came out in a rush. "My apartment building. It's burning. I'm at a shelter at the St. Jude's Community Hall. I got out. I'm safe. But, Mom," the firefighter said, "it's a total loss. Everything is gone." There was a silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the rustle of sheets as she sat up. "Oh, Sarah," she said, "that's terrible." The sympathy was there, but it was thin. It was the kind of sympathy you offer a neighbor whose car has been scratched. "I don't have anywhere to go." I said, "I'm in pajamas. I have my laptop and that's it." I waited. I waited for the automatic response. "Stay right there. We are coming to get you. You can stay with us as long as you need." I waited for the script that every family movie had taught me was universal. "Well, surely the Red Cross is helping," she asked. "Yes." They gave me a blanket. I said, "But Mom, I can't stay here. Can I come home Just for a week or so? Until I figure out the insurance, until I find a new place. The silence stretched again. It felt heavier this time. Sarah, she said, and her voice shifted. It became calm, careful. The voice she used when she was explaining why I couldn't have a puppy when I was 7. We are not doing this. Doing what I asked. Genuinely confused. Your father and I have discussed this. We have boundaries. You know how much we value our space now that we're retired. I blinked, the fluorescent lights of the hall blurring in my vision. Mom, my apartment burned down. I am not asking to move back in forever. I am asking for a bed for a few nights so I don't have to sleep on a cot in a church basement. Hold on, she said. I heard muffled voices. She was covering the receiver. I heard the low rumble of my father. Mark Butler. I imagined him putting on his glasses, looking at the alarm clock, his face set in that grim line he wore whenever my life inconvenienced his schedule. The muffling stopped. Sarah, it was my father. His voice was flat, final. Dad, please, I said. I was begging. I hated myself for it, but I was begging. Sarah, listen to me. You are 32 years old. You are an adult. This is what adults deal with. Life throws curveballs. This isn't a curveball. Dad, it's a fire, and you should have renter's insurance, he said. Do you have renter's insurance? Yes. But then use it. Get a hotel. Figure it out. Dad, I'm scared, I whispered. The admission tasted like ash in my mouth. You're hysterical, he corrected. Take a breath. Look, we warned you about living in the city. We told you it was chaotic. We aren't going to cushion you from the consequences of your choices. It's not our problem. Sarah, not our problem. The line went dead. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. It was a harsh, rhythmic buzzing that matched the ringing in my ears. I lowered the phone. I looked around the room, 2 rows down. A young woman was on her phone, crying. Oh my God. Thank you. Dad, she was saying, thank you. I'll wait outside, next to the coffee urn. A guy my age was talking to an older couple who had just rushed in, wearing coats over pajamas. The woman was hugging him, smoothing his hair, checking his face for burns. The man was draping a heavy down jacket over his son's shoulders. I pulled the scratchy gray blanket tighter around me. The humiliation was sudden and sharp. It stung worse than the smoke in my hair. It wasn't just that I was homeless. It was that I was unloved. In the hierarchy of disasters, I was alone. I was the person no one was coming for. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. I wiped it away angrily with the heel of my hand, smearing soot across my skin. Excuse me. I looked up. A man was standing in front of me. He was wearing a dark windbreaker with a logo embroidered on the chest, Larkwell Residential. He was holding a stack of papers. He looked polished, clean, and entirely out of place in the room of refugees. His hair was perfectly gelled, despite the hour. I'm Arden Pike, he said, building management. I stared at him. I'm Sarah Butler. 4C? Arden nodded, his face arranging itself into a practiced mask of concern. Ms. Butler, I am so terribly sorry for this inconvenience. We are doing everything we can to assist our residents during this difficult time. Inconvenience. He called the destruction of my home an inconvenience. Here's a sheet outlining the next steps, he said, handing me a piece of paper. It was still warm from the printer. I took it. It was a bulleted list. Contact insurance. Secure valuables. Temporary housing resources. What happened, I asked. The alarms barely went off before the smoke was everywhere. Arden sighed, a sound that seemed rehearsed. It appears to have been an electrical incident, an unfortunate accident, wiring in the walls, perhaps, these old buildings, you know. It is nobody's fault, just bad luck. He said it too smoothly. Electrical incident, nobody's fault. Will we be reimbursed for a hotel, I asked. He pointed to the paper in my hand. We encourage you to contact your private insurance provider immediately. Larkwell is working with local authorities to secure the site. Our priority is safety. He didn't answer the question. He moved on to the next person. The same script falling from his lips. Electrical incident. Nobody's fault. Terribly sorry. I looked down at the paper. The logo at the top was a stylized bird. It looked predatory. Here, honey. A woman in a heavy knitted sweater sat down in the chair next to me. She had a lanyard around her neck that said, Volunteer Legal Aid. She looked tired. Her gray hair pulled back in a messy bun. She handed me a bottle of water. I realized my throat was parched. I cracked the seal and downed half of it in one go. Thank you, I rasped. I saw you talking to the manager, she said. Her voice was low. Conspiratorial. Yeah. Arden, listen to me, she said. She leaned in closer. Do not sign anything he gives you. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Why? Because after a fire, everyone starts protecting themselves, she said. Her eyes were sharp behind her glasses. Document everything. Sarah, is that your name? Sarah? I nodded. Take photos of yourself, your injuries, if you have any. Keep every receipt. Log every phone call. Write down exactly what that man just said to you. He said it was an electrical incident. I said, and that it was nobody's fault. She smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was a grim, knowing look. Of course he did. If it's nobody's fault, nobody pays but you. Write it down. She patted my hand, then stood up and moved to a family arguing loudly near the door. I looked at the water bottle in my hand. Then I opened my go bag, took out a notebook and a pen, and wrote, Arden Pike, 4:15 a.m., claims electrical incident. Says nobody's fault. The sun came up over a city that didn't care. I left the shelter at 7 a.m. I was still wearing my pajamas, but I had put on a pair of socks from my bag and my sneakers. I wrapped the gray blanket around my waist like a strange, bulky skirt, and tied the sleeves of a spare sweater around my neck. I looked deranged, but I was too numb to care. I walked back to the building. The street was cordoned off with yellow police tape. The fire trucks were gone, replaced by a single police cruiser and a white van. The air still smelled acrid, a stench that stuck to the back of my throat. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up. The building was a skeleton. The brick facade was stained black with soot. The windows on the 4th and 5th floors were gone, just gaping maws of darkness. I could see the charred remains of ceiling beams. I found my window, 4C. It was a black hole. I could see straight through to the sky on the other side. The roof had collapsed. My bed, my desk, the dress I wore to my sister's wedding, my grandmother's recipe book, all of it, turned to ash and blown away by the wind. Hey, you can't be here. I looked down. A police officer was standing by the tape, his hand raised. I live here. I said, I lived here. Unit 4C. I just want to see if I can go in and, I don't know, find something. Structure is unstable. Ma'am, he said. No entry. You have to stay back. I nodded slowly. I stepped back, but my eyes scanned the building. That was when I saw it. The windows on the 1st and 2nd floors, the hallway windows were covered, not just boarded up, which would make sense for security. They were covered with thick black plastic sheeting, taped from the inside. Why would they do that? The fire had been on the upper floors. The lower floors were water damaged, sure, but why seal the view into the lobby so quickly? It had barely been 4 hours since the fire was put out. It looked like someone was trying to hide the interior from view. I squinted. I saw movement behind the plastic of the lobby door, a shadow moving. Ma'am, step back, the officer repeated, stepping toward me. I turned and walked away. I walked until I found a coffee shop that was open. I went into the bathroom and washed the soot off my face with gritty pink soap. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. I looked 10 years older than 32. I went out, bought a black coffee with the emergency $20 bill I kept in the go bag, and sat in the corner. I called the renter's insurance hotline. Thank you for calling Safe Harbor Insurance. Due to high call volume, your wait time is approximately 55 minutes. I sat there for an hour. I listened to a looped recording of smooth jazz. I watched people come in and get their morning lattes, complaining about traffic or the weather, They had no idea that my world had just ended. Finally, a human voice. Claim department. This is Jason. Jason. I said, my name is Sarah Butler. My apartment burned down last night. Policy number, I gave it to him. I heard typing. Okay. Ms. Butler, I see the policy here. I'm very sorry to hear about the fire. We can open a claim for you right now. I need a place to stay. I said, does my policy cover a hotel? Let me check your coverage limits. Jason said, more typing. The sound was agonizingly slow. Okay, so you have the basic economy package, Jason said. That gives you a displaced living stipend. However, there is a deductible of $1,000. Okay, I said. What does that mean for today? It means we can authorize an emergency disbursement. Once the deductible is met, we can issue a payment of, let's see, based on your limits. $400 for immediate relocation expenses. $400. I stared at the phone. Jason, a hotel in this city is $200 a night minimum. $400 won't even cover a weekend. I understand, ma'am, but that is the limit of the temporary housing clause in your specific plan. The rest of the coverage is for contents replacement, but that requires an inventory and an adjuster's review, which can take 30 to 60 days. 30 to 60 days, I felt the panic rising again. Hot and acidic. Jason, I have nothing. I'm wearing pajamas in a coffee shop. I have no home. I can process the $400 to your account today, he said, his voice robotic. It should be available within 24 hours. 24 hours. I hung up. I stared at the phone. $400. That was 2 nights at a Holiday Inn. Maybe 3 if I went out to the suburbs. And then when I looked at my contact list, Mom and Dad were at the top, not our problem. The shame washed over me again. But this time, it was mixed with a cold, hard realization. I was 32 years old, and I was entirely on my own. The safety net I thought I had was an illusion. It had burned up with my apartment. I scrolled down. I couldn't afford pride anymore. I couldn't afford to be embarrassed. I stopped at the name Maya Rios. Maya was a coworker. We ate lunch together sometimes. She had mentioned once that she had a spare room she used for storage. I hesitated. Asking a coworker for a place to sleep was a line I never thought I would cross. It was unprofessional. It was desperate. But I looked at the coffee shop window. It was starting to snow. A light, dusting snow that swirled on the pavement. I had nowhere else to go. I pressed the call button. Hey, Sarah. Maya answered on the second ring. You're up early. Everything okay? I took a deep breath. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. Maya, something happened. There was a fire. I don't have anywhere to go. There was no hesitation, no lecture about adulthood, no questions about insurance. Where are you? Maya asked instantly. I'm coming to get you. I told her. I hung up the phone and put my head in my hands. I was alive. I was safe, technically. But as I sat there, smelling the smoke on my own skin, I knew that the fire hadn't just destroyed my things. It had burned away the version of my life where I believed I was safe. Now, I was just someone surviving, and I had a feeling the survival part was just getting started. Maya Rios lived in a pre-war building in the deepest part of Queens, the kind with checkerboard tiles in the lobby and radiators that banged like trapped miners in the middle of the night. It was a 40-minute train ride from where my life used to be. But looking at the ceiling of her living room, it felt like I had emigrated to a different country entirely. I arrived at her door with 2 black heavy-duty trash bags. That was the sum total of my salvage operation. The police had allowed us 10 minutes of supervised access to the lobby to grab anything that the firefighters had tossed down the stairs or that had been deemed stable enough to reach. I had scrambled through the waterlogged pile like a raccoon, grabbing clothes that smelled of smoke and wet drywall. Here, let me take those, Maya said, her eyes darting from my face to the bags and back again. She looked terrified. Not of me, but for me. She was witnessing a disaster up close, and she didn't know the etiquette. I held on to the plastic loops. It's okay. They're heavy. I dragged them into her living room. The apartment was cozy, cluttered with macrame plant hangers and stacks of vinyl records. It smelled of vanilla candles and normalcy. I felt like a contamination source. I felt like if I stood there too long, the soot clinging to my pores would drift off and stain her beige sofa. The spare room was actually a large closet with a window, crammed with winter coats and a stationary bike that doubled as a drying rack. Maya had cleared a space on the floor for a blow-up mattress. "It's not much," she said, wringing her hands. "I can move the bike if it's perfect." "Maya," I said. I meant it. It was a door I could close. That was a luxury I hadn't expected to have again so soon. I sat down on the squeaking mattress and opened the first bag. My work blazer was there, damp and smelling of campfire, a pair of jeans, stiff with dried water, and my laptop. I pulled the computer out. It was cold and slick with condensation. This machine held my entire professional life, my photos, my tax returns. I opened the lid. Screen watermarked. I pressed the power button and held my breath. Nothing. I pressed it again. A faint whir, a flicker of the backlight, and then it died with a sad electronic chirp. I put it aside. I would put it in rice, or pray over it, or whatever you were supposed to do. I looked at Maya. She was standing in the doorway, holding a mug of tea like an offering. "Thank you," I said. She nodded, her eyes welling up. "I'm so sorry. Sarah, I can't believe it." "Me neither," I said. My voice was flat. I realized then that I had run out of adrenaline. I was operating on fumes and muscle memory. The next morning, I went to work. It was an insane decision. I know that now. But at the time, it felt like the only thing tethering me to the earth. If I went to work, I was still Sarah Butler, marketing coordinator. If I stayed in Maya's closet, I was Sarah Butler, homeless victim. I wore the blazer. I had Febrezed it until it smelled like a chemical lavender factory, but the smoke scent was still there, sitting underneath like a bass note. I wore trousers that were slightly too short because they had shrunk in the wash. Maya had let me run at midnight. I walked into the office at 9 o'clock sharp. The fluorescent lights hummed, the coffee machine hissed, everything was aggressively normal. "Sarah." It was Ken, from accounting. He stopped in the hallway, holding a donut. "I heard about the fire on the news." "Holy cow. Was that your building?" I nodded. "Yeah, it was. Are you okay?" "Did you lose?" "Stuff I lost everything." "Ken," I said. He blinked. "Oh, wow. Wow." He took a bite of his donut. He didn't know what else to do. He walked away, looking back over his shoulder once. I sat at my desk. My hands were shaking. I tried to open my email, but my fingers felt like sausages. I kept typing the wrong password. "Sarah." I looked up. It was David, my manager. He was a man who prided himself on efficiency. He wore rimless glasses and spoke in bullet points. "Can I see you in my office for a moment?" he asked. I followed him. His office had a view of the skyline. I wondered if he could see the smoke plume from here yesterday. He closed the door. He didn't sit down. He leaned against his desk, crossing his ankles, a casual pose that wasn't casual at all. "I was shocked to hear about your situation." He said, "Thank you, David. It's been a rough 24 hours. I can imagine." He paused. Looking at my blazer, I could tell he could smell the smoke. "Sarah, I want to be supportive. We all do. But I have to ask, are you sure you should be here today? I need the distraction." I said, "I need to work." He nodded slowly. "I understand that. But we have the Q4 presentation coming up next week. The client is expecting high energy. They are expecting perfection. I can do it." I said, "I'll be ready." David took off his glasses and cleaned them with a microfiber cloth. "Sarah, tragedy is difficult. It hangs on a person. I'm seeing you right now, and you look exhausted." "I am exhausted." "David?" "My house burned down." "Exactly." He put the glasses back on. "Maybe you should take some personal leave. Take a week. Get your affairs in order." I stiffened. Personal leave meant unpaid leave. I had used my vacation days for my sister's wedding in July. I can't afford to take unpaid time right now. David, I said, I have to replace everything I own. He sighed. He looked pained, as if my poverty was hurting him personally. Look, I'm not saying you have to. I'm just suggesting it for your own well-being, and for the team. We can't carry gaps right now. Sarah, if you're here, you need to be 100% here. If you're going to be distracted or taking calls from insurance adjusters all day, that's a gap. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. It wasn't just anger, it was shame. He was telling me that my tragedy was an inconvenience to his spreadsheet. He was telling me that if I couldn't perform the role of the happy, productive worker, I should go hide until I could. I won't be a gap, I said. My voice was tight. Good, he said, smiling with his mouth but not his eyes. That's the spirit. I walked back to my desk. I felt like an actor who had forgotten their lines in the middle of a play. Everyone was watching me, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to ruin the scene. I stared at my monitor until my eyes burned. I didn't type a single word for the next 2 hours. At lunch, I didn't eat. I went to the address Arden Pike had emailed to the residence list. Larkwell Residential had set up a temporary claims assistance center in a vacant retail space 3 blocks from our ruined building. It had previously been a frozen yogurt shop. I could still see the faded outlines of ice cream cones on the pastel walls. Now, it was filled with folding tables and grim-faced tenants. The line stretched out the door. I joined the back of it. It moved with agonizing slowness. Ahead of me, I recognized Mr. Henderson, the man who lived in 2B. He was arguing with a young woman behind a laptop. I just need to get my medication, he was saying. It's in the nightstand. It's pills. They won't burn. I'm sorry. Sir? The woman said, The building is condemned. No entry. I waited 40 minutes. When I finally reached the front, I was directed to a table manned by a woman named Chloe. She looked like she was fresh out of college, wearing a Larkwell polo shirt that was too big for her. Name and unit, she asked, not looking up. Sarah Butler. 4C? She typed. Okay. Ms. Butler, we have your contact info. Have you spoken to your insurance? Yes, I said. They're giving me a pittance. I need to know about the building's insurance. I need to know about retrieving my things. Chloe handed me a glossy brochure. It was navy blue with gold lettering, Brine Company. Restoration. What is this? I asked. This is our preferred vendor, she said. Larkwell has partnered with Brine Company for all contents recovery. They are the only authorized crew allowed on site. You need to sign a release form authorizing them to assess your unit. I looked at the brochure. It showed smiling workers in hazmat suits, gently cleaning a teddy bear. I don't want a stranger going through my things. I said, I want to go in. You can't, she said automatically. Unsafe. I saw workers going in this morning. I said, I saw men in blue coveralls. Those are Brine Company. Specialists. She said, they have the training and the equipment. Look, if you sign with them, they can bag and tag whatever is salvageable. They take it to their facility, clean it, and bill your insurance directly. It's very seamless. She pushed a clipboard toward me. The form was already attached. Authorization for contents removal and remediation. And if I don't sign, then nothing comes out. She said, the building will be boarded up until the structural engineers clear it. That could be months. If you want your stuff, you use brine. I looked around the room. I saw other residents holding the same brochure. I saw a man in a brine jacket talking to an elderly woman, his hand on her shoulder, guiding her hand to the signature line. It felt coordinated. It felt like a funnel. I have specific things. I said, my grandmother's ring. It's in a ceramic dish on my dresser. It won't be damaged. I just need that. And my passport. It's in the top drawer. Chloe sighed. Put it on the wish list. The wish list. She tapped a section of the form. Priority items. Write it there. If they find it. They find it. If they find it, it's a diamond ring. I said, I don't want to leave it to chance with a restoration crew. Those are your options. Ms. Butler, she said, her voice hardening, sign the release, or wait for the building to be condemned and bulldozed. I looked at the form. I felt trapped. If I didn't sign, I lost everything. If I did sign, I was handing the keys to my life over to a company I had never heard of, a company that seemed to have a monopoly on our misery. I signed. I felt sick as the ink wet the page. I walked out of the store. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, a white van rumbled past. Brine Company, on the side. I watched it turn the corner toward our building. I followed it. I stood at the police tape, hidden behind a parked car. I watched the van pull up to the service entrance. 2 men jumped out. They weren't wearing hazmat suits. They were wearing jeans and hoodies under their vests. They went inside. 5 minutes later, they came out carrying boxes, bankers' boxes. They weren't bagging and tagging. They were looting. Or at least, they were moving things with a speed that suggested they weren't documenting anything. I saw one of them laugh. He said something to the other guy and patted a box on his shoulder. My stomach twisted. They told me it was unsafe. They told me the floors might collapse, but those men were walking in and out like they were delivering pizza. I went back to Maya's apartment early. I couldn't face the office again. I sat on the blow-up mattress with my lease agreement. I had found a digital copy in my sent emails on my phone. I squinted at the tiny screen, scrolling through the legalese. Clause 14. Destruction of premises. I read it 3 times. In the event the premises are rendered uninhabitable by fire or other casualty, landlord may, at its sole discretion, provide temporary relocation assistance up to a limit of $1,500, provided the tenant is not in default. $1,500. It wasn't a lot, but it was 3 times what my insurance was offering. It was a lifeline. I called Arden Pike. His direct number was on the bottom of the next steps sheet. He answered on the first ring. Arden Pike. Arden, this is Sarah Butler. 4C. Ms. Butler. How are you holding up? His voice was smooth, like polished stone. I'm reading my lease. Arden. Clause 14. It says Larkwell can provide relocation assistance. There was a pause that sounded like him leaning back in a leather chair. Yes, I'm familiar with the clause, he said. I'd like to request that assistance. I said, I'm currently sleeping in a closet. Sarah, listen, he said. His tone shifted. It became confiding. Buddy, that clause is discretionary. It's for special circumstances. My apartment burned down. Arden, that feels pretty special. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Of course. And Larkwell wants to help. We are preparing a goodwill package for all the residents. We're going to offer everyone a flat stipend. $500, $500. The lease says up to $1,500. Up to, he corrected, and that's usually for cases where, well, let's just say we're trying to be fair to everyone. If we gave you $1,500, we'd have to give it to everyone. That's a lot of money. Sarah, Larkwell is a business. We're taking a huge hit here, too. You're taking a hit, I asked, my voice rising. I lost my home. And we lost an asset, he said. Look, the $500 is a gesture. It's generosity. We aren't obligated to give you anything if the fire was, let's say, an act of God, or tenant negligence. Are you saying it was tenant negligence, I asked? You said it was electrical. I'm saying the investigation is ongoing. He said, until it's closed, we don't have to pay a dime. But out of the goodness of our hearts, we're offering $500. If you sign a waiver. Just a standard release. Releasing Larkwell from further liability, it speeds things up. I gripped the phone. He was holding $500 hostage behind a legal wall. I'll think about it. I said, don't take too long. Sarah, he said cheerfully, we want to get those checks out by Friday. I hung up. I felt dirty. I needed help. Real help. I looked at the time. 7 o'clock. My parents would be finished with dinner. My father would be watching the news. My mother would be in the kitchen. I dialed the number again. I had rehearsed what I would say. No begging, no hysteria, just facts, just logic. Mom picked up. Hello, Mom. It's me. I said. Sarah. Her voice was guarded. We talked about this. I know. I said quickly. I know. Mom, I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking to move back in permanently. Then what is it? I just need a week. Mom, 1 week. I'm staying with a coworker. But it's bad. I'm sleeping on the floor. I just need a place to reset, to shower, to get my head straight so I can find a new apartment. I can't do that while I'm living out of a trash bag in someone else's closet. I waited. I heard the clock ticking in their hallway. Sarah, she started, and her voice wavered. It wasn't the cold, hard tone from the night before. It sounded frayed. Mom, please, it's just me. I'm your daughter. I wish we could, she said. But this is complicated. Complicated, I asked. How is it complicated? You have a guest room. It's empty. It's not just about the room, she said. Things are difficult right now. Your father. What about Dad? Is he sick? No. She stopped herself. I could hear her breathing fast. Look, we just can't. Okay, we can't get involved in this right now. Get involved in what? It's a fire. Mom, it's not a lawsuit. It's not a crime. It's just bad luck. She didn't answer. The silence stretched, heavy and strange. Mom, I have to go, she said. Her voice snapped back to the cold version. But it sounded forced this time, like she was reading a line. You're resourceful. Sarah, you'll figure it out. She hung up. I stared at the phone. This is complicated. That wasn't what you said when your daughter was homeless. You said no, or we're busy, or learn a lesson. You didn't say it's complicated. What was complicated about a guest room? I sat there in the dark of the closet, the blue light of my phone illuminating the dust motes in the air. Something was wrong. Not just bad parenting wrong. Something else. I couldn't sleep. The blow-up mattress made a rubbery sound every time I moved. At 2 a.m, I gave up. I sat up and opened my laptop. It had dried out enough to boot up, though the screen had a permanent watery blotch in the corner. I opened a search engine. I typed Larkwell Residential Fire Safety Record. Pages of listings for apartments came up. Marketing fluff. Luxury living. Modern amenities. I dug deeper. I went to the Department of Buildings database. It was a clunky, outdated government site that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1998. I typed in our address. No active violations. I clicked on history. There was a list. Most were mundane. Boiler inspection 2022 pass. Elevator maintenance 2023 pass. Then I saw it. Violation number 4992-B. October 2024. Failure to maintain fire-stopping materials in utility chases. Status administratively closed. October. That was last year. Administratively closed. That didn't mean fixed. It meant the paperwork was filed to close the ticket. I clicked for details, but the file was not available online. I sat back. Failure to maintain fire-stopping materials. That meant the stuff inside the walls that was supposed to stop fire from spreading floor to floor. If that was missing, that explained why the fire had moved so fast. That explained why it had clawed through the windows. My phone buzzed on the floor. I jumped. Who was texting me at 2:30 a.m? It was the tenants of 414 group chat, a WhatsApp group we used to complain about packages being stolen or loud music. Trent Halley, 3B. Anyone else awake? I can't stop thinking about something. I type back. I'm awake. What is it, Trent? The electrical closet in the basement. I saw maintenance in there 2 days before the fire. Me. So maybe they were fixing something. Trent. It wasn't regular maintenance. It was 2 guys I've never seen. And they weren't carrying tools. They were carrying spools of wire. And they were laughing. I stared at the screen. Trent. And then, did anyone else hear the alarms go off the night before? Just for a second, I froze. I remembered it. I had been brushing my teeth. A chirp. Just one. I had thought it was a glitch. Me. Yes. Midnight. Tuesday. Trent. Exactly. Testing. They were testing the system, or disabling parts of it. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Me, Trent. Are you saying you think someone messed with the alarms, Trent? I'm saying the alarms on my floor didn't go off until the smoke was already in the hallway. That's not normal. I looked at the next steps sheet lying on the floor. Electrical incident. Nobody's fault. I grabbed my notebook, the one the legal aid lady had told me to use. I turned to a fresh page. I wrote timeline at the top. Tuesday, November 12th, midnight. Alarms chirp. Trent hears testing. Wednesday, November 13th, afternoon, unidentified men in electrical closet. Thursday, November 14th, 3:14 a.m. fire starts. Thursday, November 14th, 4:15 a.m. Arden Pike declares it electrical incident immediately. Friday, November 15th, morning brine. Co-workers removing boxes despite unsafe status. Friday, November 15th, evening, Mom says it's complicated. I looked at the list. It looked crazy. It looked like the scribblings of a traumatized woman looking for a villain to blame for a random tragedy. Paranoid. I whispered to the empty room, but then I remembered the look on Arden Pike's face. The practiced smoothness, the rush to get us to sign waivers, the pressure to use Brine Company. Paranoia is just what it's called when no one believes you yet. I underlined Brine Company 3 times. I wasn't going to sign their waiver. I wasn't going to take their $500. I was going to find out what was in those boxes. The phone call that changed the texture of the investigation came on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was standing in the office kitchenette staring at the communal microwave. My lunch, a sad container of leftover pasta from Maya, was spinning in circles, but my mind was miles away, sifting through the wreckage of my own memory. The number was local, but not saved in my contacts. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was another insurance adjuster or perhaps a scammer promising to lower an interest rate I didn't have, but something made me slide my thumb across the screen. Sarah Butler, a voice asked. It was a man's voice. It was not smooth like Arden Pike's. It had a gravelly, tired quality to it, the voice of someone who spent a lot of time reading bad news in small font. Speaking, I said. My name is Caleb Vance. I am a private fire investigator contracted by the city's overflow division. I'm looking into the incident at 414 West Spruce. Do you have a moment? I stopped the microwave. The timer beeped, a cheerful sound that felt obscene in the quiet kitchen. I have a moment, I said. I stepped out into the hallway, pressing the phone to my ear. I'm trying to build a sensory profile of the event, Caleb said. He didn't waste time with condolences. I like that. Condolences felt cheap now. I've read the police report, and I've seen the management statement, but I need to know what you experienced, specifically. Okay, I said. When you woke up, he said, his voice dropping a register. Tell me about the smell. Before you opened the door, what was the very first thing that hit your nose, Smoke? I said automatically. Be more specific, Caleb said. Did it smell like burning wood? Like a fireplace? Or did it smell sharp? Like plastic? Like gasoline? I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the cool dry wall of the corridor. I went back to that terrifying moment in the dark. The pop, the hiss, the gray fog. It was chemical. I whispered. It smelled like burning hair and old tires. It was acrid. It made my eyes water instantly. It didn't smell like a campfire. And the sound, he asked. You mentioned a pop in your initial statement to the police. Describe the pop. It was like a knuckle cracking. I said, or maybe a light bulb bursting, but louder, dull, and then a hiss, like water hitting a hot pan. Caleb was silent for a moment. I could hear the scratch of a pen on paper on his end. Thank you. Ms. Butler, he said, that is helpful. Is that unusual, I asked? I'm going to be at the Bean Leaf on 4th Avenue in an hour, he said, ignoring my question. If you can get away, I'd like to show you something. I told David I had a doctor's appointment. He didn't look up from his computer, just waved a hand in a gesture of dismissal that meant, don't bill the hours. The coffee shop was noisy, filled with the clatter of porcelain and the hiss of steam wands. Caleb Vance was sitting at a small round table in the back. He looked nothing like I expected. I had pictured a man in a trench coat, something out of a noir film. Caleb looked like a high school geography teacher. He wore a corduroy jacket with patches on the elbows and wire-rimmed glasses that slid down his nose. He had a gray beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in weeks. He didn't stand up when I approached. He just tapped the empty chair opposite him. "Sarah," he said. I sat down. He had a large sheet of paper spread out on the table, weighing down the corners with a sugar dispenser and his own black coffee. I looked at the paper. It was a blueprint. My building. "This is the 4th floor," he said, pointing to a square in the center. "This is your unit, 4C. I stared at the lines. It looked so clinical. Just ink on paper. That square was where I slept. That square was where I cried over breakups and danced to the radio. Now it was just a crime scene. "Here is the official narrative," Caleb said. He tapped a spot inside the wall shared by my unit and the hallway. "Electrical short in the junction box. Spark ignites dry insulation. Fire travels up the chase. Textbook accidental ignition." He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. "But here's the problem," he said. He pulled a second sheet of paper from a folder. It was a photocopy of a logbook. "This is the maintenance log from the week prior." He said, "Do you see this entry?" I squinted. The handwriting was scrawled and barely legible. November 7th. Tenant complaint. Odor in hallway. 4th floor. I never saw this. I said, "I never smelled anything the week before." The complainant was in 4A. Caleb said, "Mrs. Gabler." She reported a smell she described as sweet and chemical, like nail polish remover. Nail polish remover. I repeated. "Acetone," Caleb said. He let the word hang there. "Acetone is not typically found in electrical junction boxes, Sarah, but it is found in accelerants." My stomach did a slow, sick rollover. Accelerants. That meant arson. That meant someone walked into my building and poured something on the floor intended to burn us all alive. Mrs. Gabler moved out 2 days later. Caleb said, "Broke her lease. Paid the penalty and left." "Did you know that?" "No." I said, "I didn't know Mrs. Gabler well. She kept to herself." Caleb tapped the blueprint again. "And then there are the alarms. Trent said they were delayed." I said, "My neighbor. He thinks someone was messing with them." "Mr. Hallie is observant," Caleb said. I pulled the data from the central panel. The sensors in the hallway of the 4th floor triggered at 3:14 in the morning. "That's when I woke up." I said, "Correct. But the sensors in the stairwell, the ones that trigger the building-wide evacuation signal, didn't trip until 3:17. 3 minutes. I said, 3 minutes is a lifetime in a fire." "Sarah," Caleb said. His voice was grim. "In 3 minutes, a fire can double in size 4 times. Those alarms should have been instantaneous. The delay suggests a damping of the system, or a bypass." He sat back, folding his hands over his stomach. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "If you know this, why isn't the police department shutting down the site? Why is Arden Pike still handing out flyers saying it was an accident because knowing it and proving it are different things?" Caleb said, "Discrepancies are not evidence. A delay can be a malfunction. A smell can be a spill. I need more. I need the pieces that don't fit." He looked at me, his eyes intense behind the glass. "You're asking questions, Sarah. I hear things. I know you've been asking about the contents removal. I saw them taking boxes." I said, "Brine Company. They were taking things out the back way." Caleb nodded. "Keep watching. But be careful. If this was an accident, you're just a nuisance. If it wasn't, you're a threat." I left the coffee shop with a feeling of vertigo. The ground beneath my feet felt thin, like the crust over a volcano. I decided to try the direct approach. If Caleb couldn't get the official incident number to unlock the deeper files, maybe I could. I was a victim. I had rights. I called the fire department's public information desk. "City Fire, Public Records." "Hi," I said. "My name is Sarah Butler. I'm a victim of the fire at 414 West Spruce. I'm trying to get a copy of the full incident report for my insurance." One moment. Hold music. Generic orchestral swells that sounded like they were recorded underwater. "Ma'am," the voice returned. "That report is not available for release. Why not, I asked. It's been 5 days. It is marked as pending investigation, the clerk said. I know there's an investigation, I said, but I just need the incident number and the preliminary cause. My insurance company is stalling until I have it. I can give you the incident number, she said, rattling off a string of digits, but the cause is listed as undetermined pending final review. Undetermined, I said. The building manager is telling everyone it was electrical. I can't speak to what the building manager is saying. Ma'am, I can only tell you what is in the system, and right now, the system is flagged. Flagged by who? By the marshal's office. You'll have to contact them. She gave me another number. I called it. It went to a voicemail box that said it was full. I felt like I was walking down a hallway where every door had a handle. But when I turned it, it was locked. Soft locks. No sign saying, keep out. Just bureaucratic friction designed to make you tired. To make you give up and go away. I went back to Maya's apartment. It was 6:30 in the evening. The atmosphere in the apartment had changed. The first 2 nights, it had been a slumber party of solidarity. We drank wine and she let me cry. Now, on day 5, the reality of my presence was setting in. I had turned her dining table into a command center. Stacks of printed emails, my notebook with the timeline, the brochure from Brian Coy, and copies of my insurance policy covered the surface. Maya had to eat her dinner a salad from a plastic container standing at the kitchen counter. Hey, I said, walking in. I'm sorry about the mess. I'll move it. No, it's fine, Maya said. She didn't look at me. She was scrolling on her phone. Keep working. You have to get this sorted. I felt the guilt radiate off me like heat. I was disrupting her sanctuary. I was the dark cloud in her happy home. I sat down and started gathering the papers into a pile. Did you eat? She asked, still looking at her phone. Not really, I said. I'm not hungry. Sarah, you have to eat. There's soup in the fridge. She was trying to be kind, but I could hear the strain. She wanted her table back. She wanted her quiet evening back. She wanted me to not be a tragedy anymore. I'm really going to try to find a place this weekend, I said, even if it's just a sublet. I don't want to overstay. Don't be silly, Maya said, but she didn't say. Stay as long as you like. My laptop pinged. A new email. I opened it. The subject line read, Important settlement offer goodwill reimbursement. 414 West Spruce. It was from admin@larkwellres.com. I clicked it open. Dear resident, in an effort to assist our valued community members during this difficult transition, Larkwell Residential is pleased to offer a one-time goodwill reimbursement payment to all leaseholders of record. Please find the attached settlement agreement. Larkwell Residential agrees to pay the sum of $500 to the tenant. In exchange, the tenant agrees to release, indemnify, and hold harmless Larkwell Residential, North Barrow Holdings, and all associated entities from any and all claims, demands, damages, or causes of action arising out of the incident on November 14th. This offer is valid for 48 hours. I stared at the screen. $500. It was an insult. It wasn't even enough to buy a new winter coat, let alone replace a life. But the dangerous part was the second paragraph. Release, indemnify, and hold harmless. If I signed this, I couldn't sue them if it turned out they had disabled the alarms. I couldn't sue them if it turned out they had hired arsonists. I couldn't claim my deposit back. I would be signing away my right to justice for $500, and they were putting a clock on it. 48 hours. Panic tactic. I felt a surge of rage so pure it made my hands steady. I hit reply. To Larkwell Residential. From Sarah Butler. I decline this offer. I will not be signing any release of liability while the investigation into the cause of the fire is ongoing. Please do not contact me with settlement offers again until I have legal representation. Sarah. I hit send. My phone rang 10 seconds later. It was a local number. I knew who it was before I answered. Hello, Arden, I said. Sarah. Arden Pike said. His voice was gone. The smooth customer service veneer had been stripped away. What was left was something sharp and metallic. I got your email, he said. Good. I said, "Then you know my answer." "Sarah, I don't think you understand the position you are putting yourself in." He said, "I think I understand perfectly." "Arden, you want me to sign away my rights for $500 before the fire marshal even releases the report. It's not just about you." "Sarah," he interrupted. His voice dropped, becoming intimate and threatening. "We have a fund set up, a block fund. We can't release the payments to anyone until we have full participation. It's an accounting requirement." "That's a lie." I said, "Is it? Ask Mrs. Higgins in 4B. She's calling me every hour asking for money for her heart medication. I have to tell her I can't cut the check yet because we're waiting on a few holdouts. Do you want to be the reason she can't buy her pills?" "Sarah." I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "You're disgusting," I said. "You're holding them hostage. I'm trying to close the books." "Sarah, you're the one complicating things. You and your little questions. You think you're being a hero. You're just being a wrench in the gears. And gears crush wrenches." He hung up. I stood there in the middle of Maya's living room, breathing hard. The silence of the apartment felt heavy. Maya was watching me from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "No, it's not." I needed to hear a voice that was on my side. I needed to hear someone say, "We will fight this." I went into the closet bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the air mattress, pulling the gray wool blanket around my shoulders. I dialed my parents' house. It was late, nearly 9 o'clock. My father would be locking the front door, checking the deadbolt. My mother would be wiping down the counters for the third time. Dad answered. "Butler Residence?" "Dad." "It's me, Sarah." There was a pause. "We spoke yesterday." "I know." "Dad, I'm not asking for money." "Then what is it? You sound agitated." "I am agitated." "Dad, I just got off the phone with the building manager. He threatened me." "Threatened you? How? He told me if I didn't sign a waiver for $500. He wouldn't pay anyone else in the building. He's trying to bully us." "Sarah." His voice was weary. "Just sign the paper." "What, Dad? Did you hear me? $500? For everything I own." "And an investigator called me today." The line went silent. Not the silence of a pause, but the silence of a breath held. "An investigator?" my father asked. His voice was very quiet. "Yes. His name is Caleb Vance. He's private, but he's working with the city. Dad, he showed me proof." The alarms were delayed. There was a smell of accelerant reported a week before. It wasn't an accident. I waited for the outrage. I waited for my father. The man who taught me to check the oil in my car and never sign a contract without reading it. To say, "That's criminal. We need a lawyer." Instead, the silence stretched. It stretched so long I pulled the phone away to check if the call had dropped. "Dad, Sarah. Listen to me very carefully." His voice was low, trembling with a frequency I had never heard before. It wasn't anger. It was fear. "Do not talk to that man again." "What? Why do not talk to the investigator? Do not answer his calls. And for God's sake, do not sign anything. But do not fight them either. Just walk away. Walk away, Dad. This is arson. Someone burned my home." "It is not your business," he shouted. I flinched. My father never shouted. "It is not your business." "Sarah," he repeated, breathless now. "You don't know what you are touching. You are poking at things that are bigger than you." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Do you know something I know that you need to stop? Right now. Drop it. Take the insurance money, whatever they give you, and move on. Do not get involved." "Dad, I have to go," he said. "Dad, wait. Do not get involved. Sarah, promise me." The line went dead. I sat in the dark. The closet smelled of Maya's cedar balls and my own stale panic. My father's reaction made no sense, unless it made perfect sense. He wasn't acting like a parent who was tired of his adult daughter's drama. He was acting like a man who was watching a car crash in slow motion and knew he was in the passenger seat. Not our problem. That's what they had said the first night. But tonight, it hadn't sounded like indifference. It sounded like containment. They weren't refusing to help me because they wanted me to be independent. They were refusing to help me because they wanted me distance from the fire. They wanted me to be as far away from 414 West Spruce as possible. Why I looked at the timeline in my notebook. Friday, November 15th. Evening, Mom says, "It's complicated." Tuesday, November 19th. Night, Dad shouts, "Do not get involved." My hand hovered over the page. I wrote down a new entry. Tuesday, November 19th. Dad is afraid. I closed the notebook. I understood then that I was truly alone. My parents weren't just useless, they were compromised. Whatever was happening with Larkwell Residential, whatever was happening with the electrical incident, it had tentacles that reached all the way to my parents' quiet suburban living room. And if they were afraid, I should be terrified. But as I sat there, listening to the hum of the city outside the window, terror gave way to something else. A cold, hard knot formed in the center of my chest. They wanted me to be silent. They wanted me to take $500 and disappear. They wanted me to be a good little victim. I looked at my phone. I brought up Caleb Vance's number. I didn't call him, not yet, but I saved the contact. I renamed it in my phone, not Caleb Vance, Fire Investigator. I saved him as The Only Way Out. The internet is a vast, silent graveyard of secrets, provided you know which shovel to use. I sat at Maya's dining table, the laptop screen serving as the only source of light in the room. It was 3 a.m. Maya was asleep in her bedroom, her breathing a soft rhythm that emphasized my own insomnia. The city outside was quiet, but inside my head, the noise was deafening. I had started with a simple search, Larkwell Residential. The results were the usual corporate veneer, a website featuring stock photos of smiling, diverse families holding keys, golden retrievers running through manicured parks, and slogans like, "Living Reimagined." It was a shell. I clicked on the About Us page. There were no bios of the executive team, just a generic mission statement about community and integrity. I scrolled down to the footer, to the tiny legal text that most people ignore. Larkwell Residential is a wholly owned subsidiary of North Barrow Holdings. North Barrow Holdings, I typed that into the search bar. The vibe changed instantly. Gone were the smiling families. North Barrow didn't have a consumer-facing website. They had a landing page with a logo that looked like a stylized fortress and a login portal for investors. I switched to news aggregators. I searched North Barrow Holdings lawsuits, North Barrow Holdings acquisitions. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photo developing in a darkroom. North Barrow was not a developer in the traditional sense. They were a venture capital firm. They specialized in distressed asset acquisition. They bought buildings that were failing old factories, rent-controlled tenements, warehouses in gentrifying neighborhoods, and they repositioned them. The articles were dry. Financial reporting from niche business journals. North Barrow acquires Westside Lofts. North Barrow sells redeveloped parcel for 300% profit. But I noticed a recurring theme. The buildings they bought often had issues shortly after acquisition. A boiler explosion in Brooklyn, a roof collapse in the Bronx, a sudden evacuation order due to structural instability in a building in Jersey City. They didn't just buy buildings, they broke them. They shook the tenants loose like fleas from a rug, then renovated or demolished, and sold the land to luxury developers. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. I decided to cross-reference. I typed North Barrow Holdings and staff. I wanted names. I found a PDF from a city council hearing 5 years ago. It was a list of external contractors approved for a rezoning project in the Navy Yard. I scrolled through the names of structural engineers, architects, environmental consultants, and then I stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. There, on page 14, under Independent Structural Consultants, Mark Butler. My father. I stared at the name. Mark Butler. My father was a civil engineer. He had retired 2 years ago, for most of my life. He had worked for a mid-sized firm that designed bridges and parking garages. I knew he did freelance consulting on the side to pay for my college tuition. Small jobs reviewing blueprints or inspecting foundations. I had never asked who he consulted for. I opened a new tab and searched my own email archives. I searched for Dad and work. I found an email from 6 years ago. I had been home for Thanksgiving, and he had asked me to print a document for him because his printer was out of ink. Subject invoice 2019-11. Attachment Butler_consulting_invoice_ Northborough ... PDF ... I opened the attachment ... It was a bill for $2,000 ... The description of services read, Structural Feasibility Assessment for Rapid Vacancy 202 Holden Street ... Rapid vacancy. I didn't know what that meant in engineering terms, but in the context of my burning building, it sounded terrifying. I sat back, the plastic chair digging into my spine. My father hadn't just worked for them. He had done assessments for them. He knew Northborough. He knew how they operated. Do not get involved. They'll ruin you. His fear wasn't a general paternal anxiety about his daughter fighting a corporation. It was specific. He knew exactly who was on the other side of the table because he had once sat there with them. He had taken their money. I looked at the invoice again. Rapid vacancy. Was that what they called a fire the next morning? I moved through the world like a ghost. I took the subway to work, holding the strap, watching the tunnel lights flash by. Every person I saw looked suspicious. The man reading the paper, the woman applying lipstick. I wondered if they worked for Northborough. I wondered if they knew my father. When I got to my desk, I logged in and saw an email from Caleb Vance. Sarah, following up on our conversation, do you have any written correspondence from management regarding the settlement? I need to see the language they are using. I forwarded him the email from Arden Pike, the one offering $500. The one with the indemnify and hold harmless clause. I added a note. Also, look into Northborough Holdings. My building is owned by them. And Caleb, check their history of rapid vacancy projects. I hit send. I tried to work. I had a stack of marketing copy to proofread for a client who sold organic dog food. I stared at the words holistic and grain-free until they blurred. My computer pinged. Caleb. It was a single line. This wording is not standard for accidental fires. I stared at it. Not standard. If it was a standard accident, the release would cover negligence or unforeseen events. But the release Arden had sent was broad. It was a blanket immunity deal. It was the kind of document you sign when you know you have done something wrong and you want to bury it deep. My stomach flipped. It was validation. But it was the kind of validation that makes you sick. It meant I wasn't crazy. It meant I was a target. I went to the break room to get water. When I came back, there was a voicemail on my cell phone. I didn't recognize the number. Ms. Butler, this is a courier from Dash Delivery. I have a certified document for you. I'm in the lobby of your office building. Reception said I have to call you to come down. A certified document. I went down to the lobby. The courier was a bored-looking kid in a bike helmet. He handed me a thick envelope and a digital pad to sign. I signed. My hand was shaking. I took the envelope to a corner of the lobby, away from the security guards. I ripped it open. It was a letter on heavy, cream-colored paper. The letterhead read, Vanderbilt, Stone Associates, Attorneys at Law, R.E. Cease and Desist, Defamatory Statements Regarding Brine Company, Restoration. Dear Ms. Butler, we represent Brine Company, Restoration. It has come to our attention that you have been making false, malicious, and defamatory statements regarding our clients' business practices, specifically alleging theft, mishandling of property, and unauthorized entry. These statements are patently false and have caused reputational harm to our client. You are hereby ordered to cease and desist all such communications immediately. This includes, but is not limited to, discussions with other tenants, posts on social media, and communications with unauthorized third-party investigators. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action seeking damages in excess of $50,000. Governed yourself accordingly. I leaned against the cold marble wall of the lobby. $50,000. I didn't have $50. They were watching me. They knew I was talking to the other tenants. They knew I was talking to Caleb, unauthorized third-party investigators. The letter wasn't a legal argument. It was a bludgeon. It was designed to scare me into silence. It was designed to make me feel small, poor, and powerless. And it was working. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt the urge to run, to hide, to call my dad and say I'm sorry. I stopped, I promise, but then I looked at the date on the letter. It was dated yesterday. They had sent this before I even told Arden I wouldn't sign. They had this ready. They were firing preemptive strikes. You don't fire preemptive strikes if you're innocent. You fire them if you're terrified of what someone might find. I went back up to my desk. I shoved the letter into my bag. My phone buzzed. A text from Trent Halley. Trent Sarah. Can you talk me? Not really. At work. What is it, Trent? I remembered something else. About the van. Me. The Brine Co. van, Trent. Yeah. I told you I saw it the day of the fire. But I checked my photos. I took a picture of a stray cat in the alley 2 days before the fire. Tuesday. Me and Trent. The van is in the background, in the alley. 2 days before the fire. I stared at the text bubble. Brine Company was a restoration company. They cleaned up after disasters. They didn't prevent them. Why would a disaster cleanup crew be parked in the alley of a building 48 hours before the disaster happened? Unless they were staging, unless they were moving equipment in, or moving something out. Me. Send me the photo, now. He sent it. It was a grainy photo of a scrawny orange tabby cat sitting on a dumpster, but in the background, blurry but unmistakable, was the back of a white van. The logo was partially obscured, but I could see the blue wave design, Brine Company. They were there. They were there before the first alarm rang. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This wasn't negligence. This was a script. They had a timeline. Step 1. Disable alarms. Step 2. Stage the cleanup crew. Step 3. Ignite. Step 4. Liquidate. And my father had written the feasibility study for rapid vacancy. I couldn't stay at my desk. I felt like I was vibrating. I told David I was taking an early lunch. He frowned at the clock. It was 11:30, but nodded. I walked to the temporary claims center, the frozen yogurt shop. It was emptier today. Most people must have signed the release. Desperation makes people cheap. $500 is a fortune when you have nothing. Arden Pike was sitting at a folding table in the back, typing on a laptop. He looked up when I walked in. His smile was immediate, plastic, and didn't reach his eyes. "Sarah," he said, "have you reconsidered our offer? The 48 hours is ticking." I walked up to the table. I placed my hands on the plastic surface. I got a letter from a law firm today. "Arden," I said, "representing Brine Co." "Ah," he said. He didn't look surprised. "Well, Brine takes their reputation very seriously. You have been making some wild accusations." "Sarah, I haven't accused anyone of anything yet." I said, "I'm just asking questions, like why Brine Co. had a van parked in our alley 2 days before the fire." Arden stopped typing. His fingers hovered over the keys. "That's impossible," he said smoothly. "They were dispatched at 4:30 in the morning on Thursday. I have a photo." I lied. Well, it wasn't a lie. I had Trent's photo, a time-stamped photo. Arden's face changed. The customer service mask dissolved. His jaw set. The skin around his eyes tightened. "Photos can be manipulated," he said. "Context is everything. Maybe they were working on a neighboring building." "In our private alley, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping to that low, menacing register he had used on the phone. "You are digging for a conspiracy where there is only a tragedy. You are grieving. We understand that. Grief makes people irrational." I spoke to Caleb Vance. I said, "The fire investigator." Arden flinched. It was small, just a twitch of his eyelid, but I saw it. "He says the burn patterns suggest accelerants. He says the email you sent me contains non-standard liability language." Arden stood up. He wasn't a tall man, but he loomed over the table. "Caleb Vance is a private contractor looking for a payday." Arden spat. Investigators misread things all the time. They find what they are paid to find. And if you keep listening to him, you're going to find yourself in a very expensive legal hole. Is that a threat? I asked. It's advice. Take the $500. Sign the paper. Go start your new life. Because if you keep pushing, Sarah, the offer goes away, and then the lawyers come, and they don't stop until you have nothing left to take. I already have nothing left. I said, you burned it all. I turned and walked out. My legs were shaking so hard I thought I would fall. But I kept my back straight until I was around the corner. I went back to the office. I was 20 minutes late returning from lunch. I sat at my desk and tried to focus on the dog food marketing copy. Our kibble is made with love and... My mind drifted. Rapid vacancy, accelerants, indemnify. I typed a sentence. Our kibble is designed for maximum flavor. I hit send. 10 minutes later, David appeared at my desk. Sarah, in my office. Now, I followed him. He closed the door. He was holding a printout of the email I had just sent. Sarah, did you proofread this? He asked. Yes, I said. Why? He pointed to the second paragraph. Our kibble is designed for maximum flavor and is guaranteed to cause rapid vacancy in your pet's digestion. I stared at the paper. Rapid vacancy. I had typed the words from my father's invoice. I hadn't even realized it. I had inserted my nightmare into a client's marketing copy. Oh my God. I said, David, I'm so sorry. I was thinking about something else. This went to the client. Sarah, he said. His voice was ice cold. They just replied asking if we are making a joke about diarrhea. I can fix it. I'll apologize. It's too late, David said. He sat down behind his desk. Sarah, we talked about this. I told you that we couldn't carry gaps. This is a gap. This is a crater. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm placing you on a performance improvement plan, he said. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a formal warning. Failure to meet quality standards, distraction, unprofessional conduct. If there is one more error in the next 30 days, your employment will be terminated. Terminated. I looked at him. He knew my apartment had burned down 5 days ago. He knew I was sleeping on a floor. And he was handing me a threat because I had used the wrong words in an email about dog food. It felt like punishment for being inconveniently human. It felt like the world was stripping away every layer of protection I had, one by one. First my home, then my family, now my livelihood. I understand, I said. My voice was hollow. I signed the paper. I walked out of his office. I walked past my desk. I went into the women's restroom. I went into the last stall and locked the door. I sat on the toilet lid, fully clothed, and put my hands over my mouth. I cried silently. I didn't sob. I just let the tears leak out. Hot and stinging. I was furious. I was furious at David. I was furious at Arden Pike. I was furious at my father. But mostly, I was furious at myself. I was furious that I was still so dependent on these systems that hated me. I was furious that I still needed this paycheck so badly that I had to sit there and take it. I was furious that I couldn't just burn it all down the way they had burned my home. I sat there for 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face with rough brown paper towels, checked my eyes in the mirror, applied fresh concealer, and went back to my desk to rewrite the email about dog food. That night, at 11 o'clock, my phone rang. I was lying on the air mattress in Maya's closet. The room was cold. Maya had turned down the heat to save money. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to hear another rejection. I didn't want to hear, it's complicated. But I answered. Hello, Sarah. Her voice was a whisper. She sounded like she was hiding in the bathroom. Mom. I can't talk long, she said. Your father is asleep. Why are you whispering, Sarah? Listen to me. I know you're angry. I know you think we've abandoned you. You have abandoned me. Mom, I'm literally homeless and you won't let me in the door. It's not because we don't love you, she said. Her voice broke. It's because we're trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From the truth. From the fact that Dad worked for them. The line went silent. You know, she whispered. I found the invoice. Mom, rapid vacancy. I know he worked for North Barrow. I know he helped them clear buildings. Sarah, please, she sobbed. It wasn't like that. He didn't know they set fires. He just the engineering reports. He told them which walls could be removed to make the building unstable enough to condemn. He thought they were just using loopholes. He didn't know they were using gasoline. He knew enough to be scared. I said, he knew enough to tell me not to get involved. He's terrified. Sarah, if they find out he talked, if they find out his daughter is the one digging. So that's it, I asked. You're sacrificing me to save him. You're letting me drown, so North Barrow doesn't look at Dad. We're not sacrificing you, she said. We need you to stop. Please, baby, just stop. Take the money. We can help you with money later. We have savings. We can give you cash. Just don't sign anything that links you to us. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was deeper than the winter chill. They were trying to buy me off too. Just like Arden Pike. The currency was different love, guilt, secret cash, but the transaction was the same. Be quiet. Go away. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Your father didn't want me to tell you. She said. She paused. It sounded like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into the dark. Tell me what I asked. He still consults for them. Sarah. He didn't retire. He's on a retainer. I closed my eyes. He's still on their payroll. Yes. The word hung in the air. If I expose North Barrow, I expose my father. If I bring down the company that burned my home, I bring down my own parents. I have to go, she whispered. He's waking up. The line clicked. I lowered the phone. I lay back on the air mattress. I looked at the ceiling of the closet. I had been waiting for them to save me. I had been waiting for the moment when they would snap out of it, drive into the city, pick me up, and take me home to my childhood bed. That moment was never coming. My parents weren't my safety net. They were part of the trap. I rolled over and looked at my notebook. Dad is afraid. I crossed it out. I wrote, Dad is complicit. I sat up. I wiped the remaining tears from my face. They felt dry now, like crust. I was done crying in bathrooms. I was done waiting for permission. I was done seeking comfort. Comfort was a lie. Comfort was the bribe they paid you to stay blind. I didn't want comfort anymore. I wanted the truth. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the email from Caleb Vance. To Caleb Vance. From Sarah Butler, I'm in. Tell me what we need to do to nail them. And Caleb, I don't care who goes down with them. I hit send. I wasn't Sarah the victim anymore. I was the fire that was coming for them. Caleb Vance picked me up in a rusted sedan that smelled of stale tobacco and peppermint. We didn't go to a coffee shop this time. He drove us to a bleak overlook near the river, where the wind whipped off the gray water and rattled the loose seal of the passenger window. He turned off the engine but kept the heat running. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a thick file folder. I need you to look at these, he said. He handed me a series of glossy photographs. They were high-resolution, brutally clear images of charred wood and melted plastic. These were taken by the fire department's forensic team. He said, I called in a favor to get copies. Look at the burn patterns. I stared at the black shapes. I didn't know what I was looking for. To me, it just looked like destruction. Fire is a living thing. Sarah, Caleb said, his voice quiet. It wants to go up. It wants to breathe oxygen. In a natural fire, say, a candle catching a curtain, you get a V pattern. The fire starts at a point and spreads outward and upward, like a cone. He tapped a photo of what looked like a baseboard in the hallway. But look here. This is the floor outside your unit. See how the charring is deep and low. See how it runs along the baseboard in a horizontal line, like a river. I nodded slowly. That is called a trailer, Caleb said. Fire doesn't move sideways like that unless it is following fuel. Someone poured something there. My stomach tightened. Liquid. And look at the timing, he continued. 3:14 in the morning. The deepest part of the sleep cycle. The coldest part of the night. When the heaters are running full blast. Masking the sound of movement. He took the photos back and slid them into the folder. "I can't prove who lit the match," he said. "Not yet, but the physics don't lie. This was an accelerant-based ignition designed to cut off the exits." "Cut off the exits?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You mean they wanted to kill us?" Caleb shook his head. "No. If they wanted to kill you, they would have barred the doors. They wanted to scare you. They wanted to create a situation so chaotic, so terrifying, that no one would ever want to go back inside. They wanted the building empty, and they wanted it empty fast." "Why?" I asked. "Why burn down a building you own? It's an asset. It's a distressed asset," Caleb corrected. He turned in his seat to face me. "Sarah, do you know what the vacancy rate is in your neighborhood? It's less than 1%. And do you know what rent control laws do? They lock tenants in place for decades. You were paying, what, $2,000 for a one-bedroom, $1,800? I said, "Market rate for a renovated unit in that area is $4,000. Caleb said, "But North Barrow can't renovate if you're living there, and they can't kick you out without cause. So, they have a math problem. The building is worth more as a pile of bricks than it is as a home for you." He looked out the windshield at the river. "Insurance pays for the total loss of the structure. That's payout number 1. Then, because the building is condemned, all leases are voided. That's the golden ticket. The land is now free of tenants. They rebuild. They rebrand. And they charge double the rent. It's a flip. A violent, smoky flip." I felt sick. I thought about Mrs. Higgins and her ceramic cat. I thought about the man carrying his toddler. We weren't people to them. We were just bad math. We were an obstacle to the profit margin. "But there's something else," Caleb said. He pulled a sheet of paper from his pocket. "I ran a check on the other tenants, the ones who moved out in the last 3 months. I listened. 6 households left in the 8 weeks before the fire." Caleb said, "That is a turnover rate of nearly 20%. That is unheard of in a rent-stabilized building." "People move," I said weakly. "Not these people," Caleb said. "I found 3 of them. I called them. Do you know what they told me?" I shook my head. "They told me they were offered cash buyouts. Fast cash. Move out by the 1st of the month. Get $10,000. No questions asked." $10,000, I stared at him. Arden Pike offered me $500. "Exactly," Caleb said. "They targeted the loud ones, the ones who filed complaints, the ones who would have made noise if they saw men with gas cans. They cleared the deck of the troublemakers, and the ones who stayed, the quiet ones, the ones who pay their rent on time and don't fuss. You," Caleb said, "you were the collateral damage." I went back to Maya's apartment with a new mission. If they had cleared out the troublemakers, then the roster was the key. I opened the Tenants of 414 WhatsApp group. I scrolled back, way back, before the fire, before the electrical incident. I looked for the names of the people who used to be active but had gone silent. User Loud Neighbor 5A left the group. User Boiler Broken Again left the group. I cross-referenced them with the old paper directory I had saved in a photo on my phone years ago. Mrs. Gabler. She was the one who complained about the chemical smell. Gone. Mr. Rodriguez. He was the one who was always threatening to call the city about the heat. Gone. Jessica Thorne. She was a law student who posted citations of the housing code every time the elevator broke. Gone. They had been pruned. Systematically. I sat back. It was a garden. They had weeded the garden before they burned the soil. I needed to know more about North Barrow. I needed to know who was holding the watering can. I went back to the city records. I had found my father's name on an invoice. But an invoice was just work. I needed to find the structure. I searched for North Barrow Holdings public hearings. If they were buying distressed buildings, they had to apply for permits. They had to go before zoning boards. I found a transcript from 3 years ago. Zoning Board of Appeals. Hearing regarding 202 Holden Street. That was the address on my father's invoice. The Rapid Vacancy Project. I downloaded the PDF. It was 60 pages of bureaucratic arguing about setbacks and shadow studies. I scrolled to the end. List of attendees and interested parties. There were the lawyers for North Barrow. There were the city officials. And then, halfway down the list of community stakeholders and consultants. I saw it. Diane Miller. Partner. Miller Vane. Consulting. My breath stopped. Miller. That was my mother's maiden name. Diane Miller. I had never heard of Miller Vane Consulting. My mother was a retired school administrator. She spent her days gardening and volunteering at the library. She didn't have a consulting firm. I highlighted the name. I searched for Miller Vane Consulting business registration. It came up immediately. A limited liability company registered in Delaware. Principal Agent Diane Miller. Mailing address P.O. Box 492. Oak Creek? Oak Creek was the suburb where my parents lived. I looked at the date of incorporation. 4 years ago, just after my father retired. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the trackpad. I searched for the company's filings. There was almost nothing. It was a shell. But there was one document linked to it. A statement of financial interest, filed with a different development project. Miller Vane Consulting holds a minority equity position in Northborough Distressed Asset Fund 2. Equity position. That meant ownership. That meant shares. My mother wasn't just a consultant. She was an investor. My parents didn't just work for Northborough. They owned a piece of it. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The room seemed to tilt. Not our problem. It's complicated. Do not get involved. It wasn't fear of the mob. It wasn't fear of a powerful corporation crushing their daughter. It was fear that I would find out that my rent checks were effectively paying for their retirement cruises. It was fear that I would find out that the company burning down my home was the same company padding their investment portfolio. I stood up. I knocked my chair over. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my coat. Sarah Maya called from the bedroom. "Where are you going to see my mother?" I said, "I didn't take the train. I took an Uber. It cost me $80, which was money I didn't have. But I couldn't sit on a train for an hour with this knowledge burning a hole in my brain." I arrived at their house at 2 p.m. It was a beautiful house, a colonial with white shutters and a manicured lawn that was currently covered in a tasteful layer of frost. A wreath made of dried cranberries hung on the door. It looked like the home of good people. I didn't knock. I used my key. I walked in. The house smelled of lemon polish and slow-cooked meat. It was warm. It was safe. "Ma," I called out. I heard movement in the kitchen. My mother appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked surprised, but also relieved, as if seeing me meant I had finally come to my senses. "Sarah," she said. "Oh, thank God. Did you change your mind? Did you sign the papers?" She came toward me, arms open for a hug. I stepped back. She stopped, her arms falling to her sides. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "He's at the hardware store." She said, "He'll be back soon." "Sarah, you look terrible. Have you been eating? Come in." I made a pot roast. "I don't want pot roast." "Mom," I said, "I want to talk about Miller Vane Consulting." The color drained from her face instantly. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was like someone had pulled a plug. She went gray. She gripped the dish towel in her hands. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. Her voice was too high, too brittle. "Don't," I said. "Just don't. I saw the hearing transcript." "Mom." I saw the registration. Principal Agent Diane Miller, P.O., Box 492. That's the box you use for your gardening club. She stared at me. Her mouth opened and closed. "We invested in Northborough Distressed Asset Fund 2. Didn't we?" I asked. The words felt like broken glass in my mouth. "Sarah, please," she whispered. "Come into the kitchen. Sit down." I followed her. I didn't sit. I stood by the island, gripping the granite edge. "Explain it to me," I said. "Explain to me how you own a piece of the company that burned down my apartment." "We didn't know they burned things," she cried. Tears started to spill down her cheeks. "We didn't know that." "Sarah, you have to believe me." "Then what did you know?" "We knew they were aggressive," she said. She was pleading now. "We knew they had a strategy for turning buildings over. Your father, when he retired. We were worried about money. The pension isn't what it used to be. And Mark knew these guys. He knew they made money. So he did some consulting for them." I said, Rapid vacancy. Yes, she said. He helped them assess properties, and they offered us a buy-in. It was a private placement, guaranteed 12% returns. Sarah, 12%. We couldn't say no. It was for our future. It was for me, I asked. Don't you dare say it was for me. It was for the family, she insisted. We didn't know the details. We just saw the checks. They called it asset repositioning. They said they bought rundown places and fixed them up. They don't fix them. Mom, they empty them. They force people out. We didn't ask how they did it. She said softly. We just didn't ask. And then my building burned down. I said, she looked down at the floor. When you called that night, she whispered, when you said it was a total loss. Mark knew. He knew immediately who owned the building. We checked the portfolio. It was one of the assets in Fund 2. And that's why you wouldn't let me come home. She nodded, sobbing now. We were terrified. If you stayed here, if the investigators came here, if they linked us to you, and you to the lawsuit, you were protecting your investment. I said, my voice was dead. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your 12%. No, she screamed. No, Sarah. We were protecting our lives. If this comes out, if people find out Mark was the engineer who signed off on the safety checks, and we're investors, we could lose everything, the house, the savings, everything. And what about me, I asked. I already lost everything. We can help you, she said. She reached into her apron pocket. We have cash. We can give you $20,000 right now. You can go anywhere. Start over. Just please. Don't talk to the investigator anymore. Don't ruin us. Sarah. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had bandaged my knees when I fell off my bike. The woman who had taught me to read. She was a stranger. She was a frightened, greedy stranger who had traded her daughter's safety for a comfortable retirement. I realized then that the cruelty hadn't been accidental. It had been necessary. For them to survive, I had to be silenced. My tragedy was a liability on their balance sheet. I backed away. Keep your money. I said, Sarah, wait. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked down the hallway where my graduation photos still hung on the wall. I opened the front door. My father was pulling into the driveway. He saw me. He stopped the car and got out, his face pale. Sarah, he said. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had warned me not to get involved. You knew. I said, you knew the whole time. He didn't deny it. He just slumped, looking suddenly old and small. Go home, Sarah, he said softly. Before you hurt yourself, I am home. Dad, I said. Or I used to be. I walked past him. I walked down the driveway and onto the street. I didn't look back. I sat on a bench at the train station, shivering in the cold. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Arden Pike. Subject final notice. Enhanced settlement offer. Ms. Butler. In the interest of closing this matter quickly and amicably, Larkwell Residential is authorized to increase your goodwill reimbursement to $10,000. This offer expires in 48 hours. Please consider this carefully. This is the maximum amount authorized. Failure to accept will result in the forfeiture of all assistance. Regards, Arden, $10,000, the same amount Caleb said they paid the other tenants to leave. They were treating me like a tenant they needed to evict. But I had already been evicted. Now they were trying to evict me from the truth. The urgency was palpable. Expires in 48 hours. Why 48 hours? What was happening in 2 days? Maybe they knew I was getting close. Maybe they knew Caleb was getting close. I called Caleb. He answered on the first ring. Vance, it's Sarah. I said, where are you? You sound like you're outside. I'm at the train station in Oak Creek. I said, Caleb, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to believe it. Try me, he said. I told him about the invoice. I told him about Miller Vane Consulting. I told him about the confronting my mother. I told him about the 12% returns and the asset repositioning. I told him my parents were the investors behind the fire. Caleb was silent for a long time, The wind howled through the receiver. "Sarah," he said finally. His voice was very low. "Do you understand what you just gave me?" "I think so." I said, "You gave me the motive," he said. "Not just the corporate motive, but the mechanism. If your father was the engineer of record on other North Barrow projects, and he's an investor, that's conspiracy. That's RICO territory. That's federal. I know." I said, "But you also need to understand what this means for you." He said, "What does it mean?" "It means you are the leak." Caleb said, "You are the biological link between the victims and the perpetrators. You are the one person who can connect the engineer to the money to the fire." He paused. "If you are right, Sarah, and I think you are not just a witness anymore. You're not just a nuisance. What am I?" "You're a loose end," he said. "You are a catastrophic risk to them, and people who burn down buildings for 12% returns. They don't like loose ends." I felt the cold seep into my bones. "What do?" I asked. "You come back to the city," Caleb said. "You come straight to my office. Do not go to Maya's. Do not go to your parents." "Why not Maya's?" "Because they know where she lives. Sarah, if they sent a courier to your work, they know where you're sleeping. You're not safe there." I looked at the train tracks. The lights of the approaching train were visible in the distance, a pair of glowing eyes in the dusk. "I'm coming," I said. I hung up. I looked at the email from Arden again. $10,000. It wasn't a settlement. It was hush money. And the 48 hours wasn't a deadline for the offer. It was a deadline for me. I boarded the train. I sat by the window and watched the suburbs roll by, dark and quiet and full of secrets. I touched the cold glass. I was done being Sarah Butler. The dutiful daughter. I was done being Sarah Butler. The victim. I was the risk. And if I was a risk, I was going to be the most dangerous risk they had ever taken. I was sitting on the edge of the air mattress in Maya's closet, staring at a crack in the plaster ceiling that looked like a jagged river. When my phone vibrated, it was not a ring. It was a short, sharp buzz that felt like an insect landing on my palm. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I unlocked it. There was a text message, no greeting, no preamble, just 5 words in capital letters. "Stop talking to the investigator." My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. Then, a second vibration. An image was downloading. The little wheel spun for a second, and then the picture popped onto the screen. It was a photo of my car. It was parked in the guest spot of Maya's apartment complex, wedged between a dump truck and a Honda Civic. The photo was taken from a high angle, maybe from a second-story window across the street, or from the roof of a van. It was grainy, zoomed in, but unmistakable. You could see the dent in the rear bumper I had gotten 3 years ago. You could see the pile of clothes I had left in the back seat. The timestamp on the metadata said, "Just now." I stood up. I walked to the window of the closet, Maya's spare room, and pulled the blinds down so tight the slats bent. They knew where I was. Caleb Vance had warned me. He had said that if I was right, I was a risk. But hearing it in a coffee shop and seeing a photo of your car sent to your personal phone were 2 very different species of fear. The coffee shop was theory. This was practice. Maya knocked on the doorframe. "Sarah?" she asked. She was holding a basket of laundry. "You've been in here for hours. Do you want to watch a movie? I have popcorn." I turned around. I must have looked like a ghost, because Maya dropped the laundry basket. What she said? What happened? I held up the phone. She stepped forward and looked at the screen. I watched her eyes scan the text, then the photo. I watched the color drain from her face. She looked from the phone to me, and then toward the living room window, as if she expected a brick to come crashing through the glass at any second. "That's my parking lot," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Sarah." "Who is that? I don't know," I said. "But I know who sent it." Maya took a step back. She wrapped her arms around herself. She was a good person. She was kind. She had given me a roof when I had nothing, but she was not a soldier. She was an administrative assistant who liked macrame and quiet weekends. "Sarah," she said, her voice trembling, "I can't have this. I know. I said quickly. I know. Maya, I live alone, she said. If people are watching my apartment, if they are following you. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The fear in her eyes was a mirror of my own. But hers was tinged with something else. Resentment. I had brought the fire to her door. I was a contagion. I'll leave, I said. Now she asked. It's 11 o'clock at night. I can't stay here. Maya, if I stay, I'm putting a target on your back. She didn't argue. She didn't say no. Don't be silly. We'll call the police. She just nodded, her eyes wet. I'm sorry, she whispered. I really am. But I'm scared. It's okay, I said. I grabbed my 2 trash bags. I grabbed my laptop. I grabbed the grandmother's ring I had kept in my pocket for 5 days. I walked to the door. Be safe, Maya said. She locked the deadbolt the second I crossed the threshold. I heard the chain slide into place. I walked down the stairs. I didn't take the elevator. I kept my hand in my pocket, gripping my keys like a weapon. When I got to the parking lot, I scanned the darkness. I looked for the white van. I looked for the glow of a cigarette. There was nothing. Just the wind blowing trash across the asphalt. I got into my car. I locked the doors. I checked the back seat to make sure no one was crouching there. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep moving. I slept in a motel near the airport. It was the kind of place where you pay cash and they don't ask for ID. The sheets were thin and smelled of industrial bleach. The carpet was sticky. I pushed the dresser in front of the door. At 7 in the morning. My phone rang. I jumped, knocking a glass of water off the nightstand. It shattered, soaking into the cheap carpet. I looked at the caller ID, the only way out. Caleb, I answered. Did you sleep? He asked. No, I said. They found me. Caleb. They sent me a picture of my car at Maya's place. I told you. He said. His voice was calm, infuriatingly steady. You are a loose end. Loose ends get followed. I'm at a motel by the airport. I said, what do I do? You come in, he said. Today. Come in where I have scheduled a formal interview. Caleb said. Not with me. With the assistant district attorney. I called in every marker I have. I showed them the photos of the burn patterns. I showed them the tenant turnover data. They are interested. The district attorney, I asked. That sounds big. It is big. Sarah. But it's the only way to get protection. Once your statement is on the record, once you are a formal witness in a criminal inquiry, intimidation becomes a felony with a mandatory minimum sentence. It's a shield, or a target. I said, it's both. He admitted. But right now, you're just a target. At least this way, you're a target with the law watching. When I asked, 2 o'clock, the municipal building, 4th floor, room 402. I'll be there, I said. Sarah, he added, his tone sharpened. Listen to me. This isn't a coffee shop chat. This is a sworn statement. Once you say it, you can't unsay it. You are going to accuse a billion-dollar corporation and your own parents of conspiracy to commit arson and insurance fraud. There is no going back after 2 o'clock. I know. I said, there is nothing to go back to. Caleb, they burned it all down. I went to work. It was irrational. I know. But I had 4 hours to kill before the interview, and I didn't want to sit in the motel room waiting for the maids to knock. Also, I needed the routine. I needed to pretend, for just a few hours, that I was still a person with a job and a schedule. I parked in the underground garage of my office building. It was a concrete bunker, lit by flickering yellow sodium lights. It was deep underground, safe from prying eyes, or so I thought. I walked to the elevator. Sarah, the voice echoed off the concrete walls. It was a voice I had known my entire life, a voice that used to read me bedtime stories. I turned. My father was standing by a concrete pillar. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same coat he had worn yesterday in the driveway, but he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His skin was gray, pasty, and his eyes were red-rimmed and darting nervously around the garage. Dad. I said, how did you know I was here? I know your schedule, he said. His voice was hoarse. Sarah, please, we need to talk. We talked yesterday. I said, You told me to go home. I was in shock, he said. He took a step toward me. I stepped back. He saw the movement, and his face crumbled. Sarah, don't be afraid of me. I'm your father. Then tell me the truth. I said, right here. No lies. No, it's complicated. Did you sign the papers? He looked down at his shoes. He took a deep breath, and it sounded like a rattle in his chest. Yes, he whispered. I felt the word hit me like a physical slap, even though I knew it. Hearing him say it was different. It was the final nail in the coffin of my childhood. I signed the consulting agreements, he said, speaking to the floor. Years ago, when North Barrow was first starting the fund, they needed an engineer to certify that the buildings were structurally obsolete. It was a loophole. Sarah, a way to bypass the preservation laws. And the fire safety, I asked. The alarms, the rapid vacancy. He looked up then, and his eyes were wet. I didn't know about the fires. Sarah, you have to believe me. I thought they were just paying tenants to leave. I thought they were doing aggressive construction. I didn't know they were using accelerants. I swear to God. But you suspected. I said, when my building burned, you knew. I worried. He admitted. And then when I checked the fund and saw the address, he wiped his mouth with a shaking hand. Sarah, listen to me. You are going to meet with someone today. I know. How do you know? I asked. Arden Pike called me. He said, Arden Pike calls you. He called me this morning. He knows you're talking to the investigator. He knows they are setting up a meeting. Sarah, if you go into that room, if you mention my name, what I asked, what happens? They will put me in prison. Sarah. The silence in the garage was deafening. The hum of the ventilation fans seemed to stop. He looked at me, pleading. He looked pathetic. He wasn't a villain. He was a weak man who had sold his integrity for 12% interest, and now the bill was due. I am 68 years old, he said. Your mother. She can't survive that. We will lose the house. We will lose the pension. We will die in jail. Is that what you want? I want justice. Dad, I lost my home. We can buy you a new home, he cried. He reached into his coat pocket. I have a check. Arden gave it to me. It's for $50,000. Sarah, $50,000. You can move to a new city. You can start over. You can have a life. He held out a white envelope. Please, he said, take it. Walk away. Don't destroy your family for a building that is already gone. I looked at the envelope. $50,000. It was more money than I made in a year. It was enough to fix everything. I could go to Chicago. I could go to Denver. I could forget the smell of smoke. I looked at my father's hands. They were shaking. He wasn't afraid for me. He kept saying, they'll ruin you. But he meant, they'll ruin me. He was afraid of the handcuffs. He was afraid of the neighbors finding out. He was afraid of the shame. I looked him in the eye. You're not afraid they'll ruin me. Dad, I said softly, you're afraid they'll find out who you really are. Sarah. I'm not taking the money, I said. He froze. And I'm not walking away. I turned and pressed the elevator button. Sarah, he shouted. It echoed like a gunshot. Don't do this. You don't know what these people are capable of. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Through the narrowing gap, I saw my father standing alone in the concrete dark, holding the envelope of hush money, looking like a man who had already died. I didn't go up to my office. I couldn't face the dog food marketing. I couldn't face David. I went back down to the street and walked. I walked for 3 hours. I walked through the park, where the trees were bare skeletons against the gray sky. I walked past the expensive brownstones where people like Arden Pike probably lived. I ended up in a diner near the municipal building. I ordered coffee and didn't drink it. I took the ring out of my pocket. It was my grandmother's ring, a simple gold band with a small, cloudy diamond. It was the only thing I had saved from the dresser. Everything else, the photos, the letters, the clothes, the books, was ash. I turned the ring over in my fingers. It was cold. My life was split now. There was the before, in the before. I had parents who loved me. I had a home. I had a belief that the world was generally fair. and that if you followed the rules, you would be safe. And then there was the after. In the after, the world was a machine that ate people for profit. In the after, parents were investors first and family second. In the after, safety was a lie you told yourself so you could sleep. I put the ring on my finger. It was loose. I had lost weight in the last week. I looked at the clock. 1:45. It was time. The municipal building was a fortress of limestone and granite. It looked like it was built to withstand a siege. I walked through the metal detectors. I put my bag on the belt. The guard waved the wand over me. I felt like I was entering a prison, not a sanctuary. 4th floor. The elevator opened into a hallway with marble floors and high ceilings. It smelled of floor wax and old paper. I saw the sign, District Attorney, Special Investigations. I walked toward it, and then I stopped. There was a seating area in the lobby, a cluster of leather chairs arranged around a low table. Arden Pike was sitting there. He wasn't wearing his Larkwell polo shirt. He was wearing a suit, a very expensive charcoal gray suit. He looked calm. He was reading a magazine. Sitting next to him was another man, a man I didn't recognize. This man was older. He had silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of flint. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my parents' house. He wasn't looking at a magazine. He was looking at the door. He was looking for me. He didn't look like a lawyer. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like the kind of man who belongs to no agency and every agency at once. The kind of man who fixes problems that can't be fixed with paperwork. Arden saw me. He didn't smile. He didn't stand up. He just looked at me. And then he nudged the man next to him. The silver-haired man turned his gaze on me. It was blank, dead. It was the look a shark gives a seal. Not hate, just assessment. My legs felt like water. They were here. They knew about the interview. They were sitting outside the door like gargoyles. Why to scare me? To intercept me? Arden lifted his hand and tapped his watch. A subtle gesture. Time is running out. I wanted to run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, get back in the elevator, and disappear. I could take the $50,000. I could vanish. Sarah. I jumped. The door to the district attorney's office had opened. Caleb Vance was standing there. He looked tired. He was wearing a tie that was slightly crooked. He saw me, and then he saw Arden Pike and the stranger. Caleb's eyes narrowed. He stepped out into the hallway, placing his body between me and them, a small, futile shield. "You made it," he said softly. "They're here." I whispered, "I see them." Caleb said, "He didn't look at them. He looked at me. Ignore them. They are here to rattle you. That is all they have left. Intimidation. If they had a legal way to stop this, they would be in the courtroom, not the lobby." "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm sure," he said, "but you have to walk through that door. Sarah, you have to cross the line." I took a breath. My phone buzzed in my hand. I shouldn't have looked. I should have turned it off. But I looked. It was a text from my mother. "Please don't do this. We can fix it. Dad is sick. Please, Sarah. They will destroy us." I stared at the words. They will destroy us. It wasn't, they will destroy you. It was us. She was asking me to save them. She was asking me to swallow the fire, to swallow the loss, to swallow the injustice, so that they could keep their house and their garden and their illusion of being good people. I looked at the closed door of the interview room. Inside that room was the truth. Inside that room was the only way to make the burning stop. I looked at the exit. Out there was safety. Out there was money. Out there was a life where I never had to think about North Barrow Holdings again. But it was a life built on ash. I looked at Arden Pike. He was smirking now, a tiny, confident curl of his lip. He thought he had won. He thought the text from my mother, which he probably orchestrated, was the final straw. I looked at Caleb. He wasn't pushing me. He was just waiting. I gripped the grandmother's ring on my finger. I felt the cold metal against my skin. I remembered the smell of the smoke. I remembered Mrs. Higgins clutching her ceramic cat. I remembered the sound of the pop. I looked at my phone one last time. I slid my thumb across the screen. Delete. I put the phone in my pocket. I looked at Arden Pike. I met his eyes, and for the first time, I saw the smirk falter. I turned to Caleb. "I'm ready," I said. Caleb nodded. He held the door open. I took a step, then another. The marble floor clicked under my heels. I walked past Arden. I didn't look down. I walked past the stranger. I stepped into the office. It was a small room with a long table. A woman with a stenographer's machine was waiting. A man with a badge was sitting at the head of the table. "Please, sit down." "Ms. Butler," the man said. I sat. The chair was heavy wood. It felt solid. "State your full name for the record," the man said. I lifted my chin. I looked at the stenographer. I looked at the window, where the city skyline was etched against the gray sky. I took a deep breath, a long, sharp inhale that filled my lungs with the clean, sterile air of the room, and I began. Thank you for listening to After My Apartment Burned. My parents said, "Not our problem," until the fire investigator arrived. This story explores the painful reality of betrayal, not just by faceless corporations, but by the people who are supposed to protect us. It's a story about the moment we realize we have to save ourselves. I would love to hear your thoughts on Sarah's choice. Would you have walked into that room, knowing it would destroy your family, or would you have taken the money? Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, retribution, and the dark side of human nature. Share your thoughts in English below. Until next time.